I'm Sean Fennessey, and this is The Big Picture, a conversation show about the jugglers and the clowns when they all did tricks for you.
Didn't you?
The Susie Rotolo and Joan Baez of my life. Chris Ryan and Mallory Rubin.
Jeez.
What's happening, guys?
We never did too much talking anyway.
Not until today. Today we are talking about A Complete Unknown, which is the new docudrama about Bob Dylan in a very particular period in his life, a critical period in his life between 1961 and 1965 when he came to New York and ultimately went electric. This movie is directed by James Mangold.
Big Jim.
It is co-written by Mangold. I believe he did a rewrite of a script by the great Jay Cox.
Yep.
This movie, of course, stars Timothée Chalamet as Bob Dylan.
Boy, does it.
Listeners of this show know that I have been deeply concerned about this movie for some time. And I'm a huge Bob Dylan fan. I know Mallory is also essentially on a par with me in terms of Dylan fandom, a mega fan. Chris Ryan.
Very big Bob Dylan fan. But
How would you put yourself in the hierarchy?
I think that he was like a really formative person for me, but other maybe acts from that time period have eclipsed him in terms of my like constant interest in returning to it.
You're more of a Pete Seeger guy.
But I was going to say that this movie marks what is a pretty reliable every 5 to 7 years. There is a Dylan revival because of a film or a documentary that comes out or a book or an appearance. And this is the great gift of Dylan fandom is that you can kind of leave it for a few years and then something will happen where you're like, well, it looks like I have to go listen to a 10-hour chronological playlist of his work from 1960 to 1970.
10 hours, so deeply abridged.
Yeah, I was going to say, that ain't much.
Yeah.
Mal, why don't you talk about your fandom appreciation, how you came to love Dylan?
Sure. I would say he is the most important man in my life other than the two of you.
What's up, Adam?
Yeah. Adam. What about Barry? Jesus Christ.
And Barry Rubin, who of course introduced me to Dylan. Yeah, I was trying to think back and identify the exact moment in time where I really fell into the discography. And I can't tell you the exact year, but I am certain that I just stumbled upon Biograph in my dad's living room. That is definitely what happened. And it was early high school for sure. And also then Love and Theft had come out in 2001. And that double whammy of realizing the depth of music and history and decades of exploration that awaited, and also that there was something brand spanking new, featuring, to this day, one of my favorite songs of all time, Mississippi. And now we're two decades further down the road, and that is still true for anybody who stumbles upon Dylan today. There's something brand new waiting, and there's just now even more history. So right away, he became my favorite, and that has lasted. He is my favorite musician. He's my favorite writer. He's my favorite poet. He's certainly my favorite character in film or documentary. And I just think that he's the absolute best. And so because of that, I, like you, was incredibly nervous about the movie. I would describe my anticipation level as active dread.
Yeah.
And so I look forward to exploring why that proved to be ill-founded.
Number one, I never had a doubt, first of all. For A Complete Unknown.
You never had a doubt?
No, I was long this movie, and we'll get into whether I was right or wrong. Just to piggyback off what Mal's saying, I do want to say that one of the things that this film does very well, and one of the things that I think is the most rewarding part about being a Dylan fan, is that you get to do 3 different things at once. You have the work itself, so you can just revisit these albums and live in them, and they mean different things to you at different points in your life.
Yes.
You have the absolute 2 universities worth of scholarship and writing and thinking and documentary filmmaking and people who spend all their time on Reddit analyzing Dylan and the Dead shows and stuff like that. But then you also have this incredible wealth of stuff that Mal mentioned, Biograph, but for me it was the first bootleg series, which I think came out in 89, but was a huge part of when I first started working at record stores at the end of high school. That would get played a lot. And it was my first glimpse into listening to someone becoming what they were about to be. So basically listening to the creative process take place.
Yeah.
And that was my first introduction to the idea that like a Rolling Stone does not just happen.
Right.
It's it's 18 takes of it and it's a waltz with a piano, and then accidentally a guy comes in and starts playing an organ and you're like, no. I didn't know that's how art got made.
Yeah.
So you get to see that you get to listen to that, obviously, but to actually see some of it dramatized was one of the great pleasures of this movie.
Very similar to how I feel getting to watch Chris put together a Talk the Thrones outline. All the stages of discovery.
Yeah.
Also deeply influenced by Rambo and
mostly
Ginsberg.
composed in the bathtub.
Yeah.
What about you? What was your origin story with Big Bob?
It's similar to yours. I'm just a little bit older than you, so Time Out of Mind becoming a phenomenon, many years after I think most people had felt like Bob's best years were behind him. That was a huge comeback for him, that record. It was, Grammy celebrated. He'd done an Unplugged around that time. And so he was very much back in the consciousness in a mainstream way after a long, roughly like 82 through 95. It's a very quiet period. And that's really my adolescence. And so up to that point, I think a lot of kids who were big readers, as we all were, I was deeply interested in music and had a simultaneous hyper obsession with the contemporary and hyper obsession with trying to like cram in as much knowledge of the past as possible. And if you listen to a lot of classic rock, he just recurs. Like if you listen to a Byrds record, his songs are all over the place. If you listen to the Beatles, his influence is all over the place. If you start reading about the construction of popular music and especially rock and roll in the 60s, he just looms so strongly over all the writing. And so, same for me. He's my favorite writer. I can listen to songs that I first heard when I was 11 and still be kind of untangling them and finding new meanings and new appreciation for them. Just have a very big emotional relationship to the music. And it's one of the few things I've remained uncynical about in my life. And I think it's one reason why I think this movie scared me a little bit, and I think there have been, to your point, Chris, like a lot of really good films about who he is or what he is or using his music in compelling ways or using him as a performer in compelling ways. Yeah. He's been in some of the best concert films of all time, some of the best documentaries ever made. He has been in great Westerns. He's made his own movies. Like he is meaningful to movie history too. Yeah. And there's never really been something like this, which is extremely Hollywood and standard. Yep. This is very straightforward. And we know now after like roughly 20 or so years of this framework, kind of typical and cliche riddled style of movie making. So I'm a fan of Mangold.
Yeah, same.
I think it's interesting that he chose to do this movie because of course he made Walk the Line, which was a big success, won Reese Witherspoon an Academy Award. Most people felt Joaquin Phoenix pulled off a performance of a person who is unreplicable in Johnny Cash. And you've got a very similar challenge with this movie with trying to personify someone who is as much living mythology as he is just a guy in somebody's house right now.
Right.
And, in the aftermath of Walk the Line, he made the Walk Hard came out and Walk Hard detonated this format forever. Like and that movie is so clearly inspired by the success of Walk the Line. And I got to give Mangold credit for just like not hearing the footsteps because he kind of just commits like every sin all over again in this movie. And so I want to use that as like an entree into talking about whether you guys like the movie or not, because you can like the movie because of those things. You can like the movie in spite of those things, or you can reject it because of those things. I think those are kind of your choices. So where did you land on A Complete Unknown?
I actually found it to be probably a little bit less formulaic than maybe you're describing it. Like, I think it's actually more or less a very, very, very long music video. Like the lack of dialogue in this film and the lack of really particularly dramatic scenes. There's like half a dozen maybe. And because if you know anything about Dylan, or even if you're just using the logic of like, well, I know that he actually does go electric, so this is sort of a moot point. Like, you just wind up immersing yourself in the power of that music. And there are a lot of parts about it that I think are going to be mocked, but I'm almost like, well, what did you think people were doing when they saw Bob Dylan the first time? They were probably staring at him. Yeah. Because they were like, holy shit. He's, and so even if there are factual or historical inaccuracies in the film in an effort to like build up dramatic tension or something like that, I found myself basically like unmoved the entire film, never itching, never being like, when is this over? Or when are they get to Newport? Or when does he meet Mike Bloomfield? I was like, I am so happy to be going on the magic carpet ride. I think from the moment it starts in the back of a station wagon, you're like, holy shit, dude, this is great. And I fully acknowledge that Queen fans might have felt that way about Bohemian Rhapsody, and Elton John fans might have felt that way about Rocket Man, and I did not. I was like, this sucks. But for Bob Dylan, for something I care about, I think they did a really credible job of creating, is it a Hall of Presidents feeling? For sure.
Yeah.
I don't care. Like, I like going to Disney every once in a while.
Totally.
What'd you think, Mel?
This is my favorite movie in a long time.
Why?
Even though I don't, and Chris and I saw it together, and we talked about this right after with Joe. We all saw it together. I wouldn't necessarily call it a movie.
Yeah.
And that's obviously something I'm interested in discussing with you both today. But I was absolutely riveted watching it. Like, my eyes were as wide as Scoot's the entire time.
You moved as much as him as well. Yeah.
Every time Boyd came on screen, I was like, elbowing Chris. And he's like, I know.
Boyd
here.
Holbrook
Yes,
portrays
Boyd
Johnny Cash in the film. Yeah.
Boy, does he.
You have plenty of opportunity here today.
Boy, does he. You know, as we've already alluded to, it's hard to think of too many people in the history of music or really any aspect of culture who have not only made the impact that Bob Dylan made, but have been like chronicled to the length that Dylan has been chronicled. And so like part of what I was nervous about was just like, why? Right? What will we, and especially because I think this period in particular, 61 to Newport and 65, is one of the most studied and interrogated and pored over stretches of musical history. Now, I'm a Bob Dylan lover, but I can't claim to be a music historian like you are. And yet, even I know a lot about that period in time and what this represented.
This was my complaint when I first heard about the movie, is I was like, this is the least interesting time to me. This is the one I least want the docudrama about, because it's the one with no mystery.
Right. And so the combination of, and I do think like one of my critiques of the film, which again, I loved, is that I think you start to really feel that in the third act. I thought the first hour 45 was way stronger than the closing stretch, because you start to feel the inevitability of reverse engineering against the quote unquote purpose of the film.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think for us sitting in the seats and for the people who are making it, the purpose of the film is to just spend time with one of the most consequential figures in the history of the world. And the performances were unbelievable. Like, Timothée Chalamet was uncanny and unbelievable as Bob Dylan in a way that, I mean, I love Timmy. I think he's a great actor. And when the trailer came out for the movie, I was like, oh, what is happening here? What is happening here? What have they done? And watching it, I was, again, just like completely swept up in the magic of enjoying the thing. I think like when it ended, Chris, you know, we were looking up at the credits rolling and it's screen after screen after screen of song, right? And you were observing like, just is Dylan going to get like a screenwriting credit, right? Because so much of the script of the movie is in fact the songs. But I ended up loving it. I think it was an inversion of what I anticipated. I thought the songs would play second fiddle to an attempt to interrogate an unknowable figure, and that was just simply not the case. And I love that about it. No,
doesn't even. It's the most fascinating thing to me about the movie. And I definitely am not as enthusiastic as either of you guys. I think I like it way more than I thought I would.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of times where I just like burst into tears while they were singing, where I was just like, this is incredible. And it is that thing you're talking about with Queen, where just like hearing those songs so loud and them nailing the performances is just, it just took me over. Like, I can never sit in a movie like that and be like, this isn't good. You know, like it is impactful.
Yeah.
But you know, I don't know. I'm totally stumped on this movie in so many ways about how I feel about it, because did I want a Bob Dylan movie that was it going to attempt to interrogate what he was up to and to unpack his psyche and his motivations, or do I want something that just sort of, you know, burnishes the myth a little bit, and then otherwise just platforms the music? What would have been better? I don't know. I do think it's interesting that like there's really no meaningful exploration of the interiority of Bob Dylan at all.
Yeah. So you mentioned Walk Hard as like this comparison point, and Jim Mangold basically like kind of being like, I'm fuck it, I'm doubling down. To me, the very useful comparison point would be I'm Not There for this film, which I know we're going to talk about Dylan on screen in a little bit, but I can't resist talking a little bit about Todd Haynes' 2007 movie before that, because Todd Haynes' conception of this story, not necessarily this specific story, although there is the Cate Blanchett section is essentially the second half of this movie, the polka dot shirt, essentially. That's the kaleidoscopic way of doing this. That's the he's unknowable, so we have to shatter the urn and piece it back together through all these postmodern storytelling devices. And I think that I just really responded to Mangold being straight up, I'm just gonna look this thing in the eye. And there may not be a core here. I may not get to the is this guy an act of self-creation? Does that matter? How did he treat women? I don't. Yeah, there's an unknowability to that, and to some extent, that's not Chalamet's fault, but it was almost like watching someone's game tape, where you're oh my god, this guy is
Timmy
really,
would appreciate that,
and I'm sure he would. Yeah. But it's this guy fucking learned how to play guitar for 5 years.
Dude.
He can do this in a master shot, and you don't have to dub in stuff and everything. Yeah. Let's get as much of that up on screen as possible, and that is going to be a very worthwhile experience in a movie theater.
So I did a thing that I've never done in the history of podcasting about movies. I went to a screening, and then I reached out to the studio and was like, I have seen the movie, but can I please see it again?
I was so amazed when you told me that earlier.
I just because I couldn't stop thinking about it. And so the second time that I went, there was a panel after the film with Mangold and the cast. And one of the things, this is what you were just saying, made me think of this.
Chalamet's just furious about the seating in the CFP.
He's like, I thought we were here to talk
about
How
is Boise State getting this
McAfee, stop talking over me.
Yeah. One of the things that Mangold said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but was he really pushed back against the idea that the film is about the fact that Bob Dylan is an enigma. Mm-hmm. And he said, in essence, you can't play a question mark. I can't tell Timmy to play a question mark. And we know him through the songs. He gave us all these songs. What more do we want than what he told us about himself in the songs? Now, I really don't agree
at all
with that, but I found that to be such a fascinating perspective. And the fact that we're I don't agree with that, even though you made the movie, is to me part of the proposition and part of the reason why, even though Bob Dylan has been in people's lives for so long and studied at such length, it's worth making a movie like this. Mm-hmm. Because just as he is a figure defined by reinvention, that's why I'm not there. This movie does it with one actor, but in very different tone, right? And sensibility. Yeah. But it's the same thesis in a way, right? It's when we see The Envelope or The Notebook with Zimmerman on it, there's not a single moment other than Sylvie, the Sue's stand-in, saying, are you going to tell me anything about your past?
Or the sister being I guess he wasn't really in a carnival, right?
It's just there as one more fact on the ground, right? One more bit of context to say, well, before we even got to the period where everyone was studying how he reinvented himself, this was an inevitability. This is who he is at his core. It's why when Seeger is driving him to his log cabin built by his own hands, and they're talking about the idea of being a folk singer, he's like, well, modified, right? Before any of this actually even happens. Mm-hmm. And so why is the movie called A Complete Unknown? Well, of course, that's a lyric in the song that we're building toward. This is a period in his life where he became famous. I love that moment where he's writing the letter to Johnny. He's like, I'm famous. Famous. I'm excited for some of Chris's voice work today. But I think that despite what the director and maker of the movie is saying, it is also an acknowledgement that this is a figure who in some way will forever defy the level of interrogation that he invites.
Yeah, so the one thing that I think the movie is very confident in doing, which I think is a real credit to it, because it didn't have to do it this way. And a lot of times when you have movies that are executive produced by living artists, you don't see this. But this movie is very steadfast in pointing out that Bob Dylan is an asshole.
Oh, yeah.
And especially at this time in his life, that he has a complicated relationship with the women that he seduces or that he spends time with, that as an artist, he is defiant of people who took care of him and put him on their shoulders, that he is willing to kind of mangle history in an effort to go forward. One of the best things and worst things that I've done since I saw the movie was I rewatched No Direction Home, which is Martin Scorsese's documentary, sort of archival documentary about this exact period. It's the same time. It's 61 through 65. And that movie is just amazing if you love Bob Dylan, because you have so many of the key people who were in his life at the time. Susie Rotolo, Dave Van Ronk, all friends from Minnesota, people in 1997
Yep.
explicitly explaining what Bob was like. And Bob's in it too. And Bob gives one of the longest interviews he's ever given. He gives tons of great information. But throughout that entire documentary, you get the sense that like Bob Dylan was a real opportunist. In fact, I think someone calls him that at a certain point, that even though he is this touched, like almost like angelically God-gifted thinker and writer, that he was like, I want to win. Like him wanting to be famous, him wanting to ascend
for sure
above whatever the expectations of a traditional folk singer would be are so interesting. And I give the movie a lot of credit for not shying away from that.
Yeah.
For not trying to valorize him. Because Bob Dylan is like, I'm not a protest singer. These songs are not about that. There's something different.
Totally.
And so I respect that they did that. It still doesn't resolve. It's the only thing that it kind of like confirms to me.
Yeah, I think that he definitely moved too fast for culture to keep up with. And so by that logic would move too fast for a movie to capture. I mean, Todd Haynes actually had this really good quote when he was asked about casting the 6 different actors where he said, the minute you try to grab hold of Dylan, he's no longer where he was. He's like a flame. If you try to hold him in your hand, you'll surely get burned.
Yeah.
James Mangold was like, I made a movie about Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
You know,
I killed Wolverine.
Yeah, like he's like, I think I can do this, and I think what he does, that when I think about why I am going to go watch this movie again, it's everything that's on the outside of the frame. It's the depth of realization of the apartment, the CBS studios, the control room, the notebooks, the coffee cups, the cigarettes, the wine bottles. Like, I want to see all the accoutrement. I will go back for Chalamet. It could have gone so wrong.
Yeah.
And it doesn't. And he knows it. And that's why he's having one of the great promo runs in American history. Is like, he didn't fuck it up. And if he had fucked this up, it would have been one of the all-time flops in like you could ever have. So I really do think that there is a kind of he is trying to look at this object straight on, and it is an object that never ever allowed itself to be regarded that way.
Yeah, I mean, what I wrote down in the notes is just like, Dylan is prismatic, he's not linear, and this is a movie that's trying to tell you a linear story. Yeah. Todd Haynes does the absolute best he can by, as you say, shattering the urn, trying to give him, sort of multifarious meaning by putting him inside of lots of different people, because that's how Bob Dylan imagined himself as a shapeshifter. There's like, the Irish love Bob Dylan because Bob Dylan is like a folkloric character. Like he resembles a leprechaun in so many ways because he's a trickster. But the movie, it's like deep and abiding sincerity is just like a little much for me, where I'm like, this is the guy who wrote Fourth Time Around just to make fun of Bob Dylan. Just to make fun of John Lennon. You know what I mean? Like he's like a motherfucker.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit too much. When I say that they're biopic cliches, it's the long holds on people admiringly gazing upon him. It's the like impressionistic flashes of moments rather than any deeper exploration of a big moment. Like him writing a song, like what did we really learn about him writing a song in this movie? That he was like, went over to Joan Baez's apartment one night and did it to like embarrass her? Like,
did you come here to make me watch you write? Was fucking iconic.
Great line. Great line.
Incredible.
And then there's also just like the very typical, like, this is the establishment and what he's doing is wrong. And it's way beyond what anyone should do in an artistic space. Like it's in every one of these movies. And the other thing is just like, this movie got refashioned to be a love triangle, and I'm not totally sure that stuff ultimately works. But I'm curious what you guys think.
Oh my God, I have so many thoughts on everything you both just said. Okay, is the pod's like 10 hours, right?
We just started. This is actually a live telethon for Bob.
That would be great. Sign me up if we ever do that.
He'll be performing at the end.
Okay, on the love triangle front. So obviously that's true. Sylvie, Joan, Bob. And despite those parts of the movie not always gripping us and grabbing us the way that other parts do, I will say that when they're singing It Ain't Me, Babe, and she is watching, it fucking shattered me. Like it destroyed me. It was devastating. When Sylvie is watching him sing The Times They Are Changin'. And this is a figure who, when everyone else was like, sing the classics, right? What folk music is a tradition that we pass on and share. Sylvie was the one who said to him, well, the old songs like had to be new once. Play your songs. songs. And then she watches him sing The Times They Are Changin'. One of the best moments of the movie in general. We'll talk about some of our favorite musical numbers, so I'll come back to that. But the piece of paper, the scrap of paper that she found with a verse from that song, and she has to confront the fact that he would not share that with her, but shared it with the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like those parts of it were, I thought, very emotionally like impactful. Overall, though, thematically, the Sylvie, Joan, Bob love triangle is just a parallel to the folk rock love triangle.
Mhm.
That's the real love triangle in the movie. And it's I thought the movie was effective in that sense of like drawing the parallels and saying like it's a story about expression
Mhm.
and passion and temptation and like understanding his compulsion for constant reinvention through that lens. Like, where are you being pulled in a given moment in time, and saying to everyone around you who you form a connection with at any given point, there's gonna be something after you, and there's gonna be someone.
It's the
after
same thing
you.
he was saying to like music fans. As soon as you're
Exactly.
into Highway 61, I'm on to something else. As soon as you're into Blonde and Blonde, I'm on to something else. I'm going to
Yes.
disappear. I'm going to come back.
Yeah.
You think I'm, this iconoclast? What happens when I become like a devoutly religious
Right.
singer? Like
Totally.
he's
Yeah.
always confounded and sometimes maddeningly ways
Yeah.
what we expect of him.
Yeah, and I think like to the point about being an asshole, I mean, that's obviously one of the great joys of the movie. And I think it had to be there. Like you can't make a Bob Dylan movie in a world where Don't Look Back exists
Yeah,
and
and then be
pretend
like,
like he's a nice guy.
He's a cool guy.
You just simply couldn't do it. It would
The
defy
nice thing that they
belief.
did is they capture him also being a funny asshole.
Yeah.
Could be cruel, could be a little bit nasty,
and very honest. And this
Yeah.
gets back to what you were saying earlier about like opportunity, but just also ambition and the fact that like people talk a lot about, I mean, it's very difficult to say there's nothing new to say about a Bob Dylan song, but like part of what's always fun in perpetuity to talk about is just how like he makes you feel at a given moment in time,
Mhm.
right? And one of the things that I think even if people have very different relationships to his music that recurs is like the truth, the honesty, the wisdom, right? Like the guitar pick's not dipped in honey, it's dipped in acid. Like the assholery is part of the draw.
Yeah.
Like the gall to say those things out loud and then sing them to the world. I loved the moment when like he and Sylvia are walking down the street. I think maybe when they're on the way to see before they hit the theater to see like Now Voyager, and he says, there's that like about being a freak, right? And she's like, are you a freak? And he's like, I hope so.
Mhm.
I loved that, right? And he's like, you can be beautiful, you can be ugly, like you can't be plain. And I think that sometimes, and I have this tendency too, and like the compulsion to talk about the the church of Bob Dylan and like sermons, but not preachy ones. Like the fact that one of the things I love about Don't Look Back in that incredible documentary is like the moment where they're like, the crowd was silent and that was amazing. Like
Mhm.
people sat in awe
Mhm.
to listen
Yeah.
to him. It wasn't like screaming, right?
Well, part of that is because of what you were just describing, which is that in 62, 63, Newport Folk Festival, he was the only person singing new songs.
Right.
So they were listening to the words
Yeah.
because they were not songs that they had heard 100 or 200 times before.
Right.
And so there was this sense of revelation. There was this messianic moment because it was about arrival. I don't know. I still think there's like definitely some rote stuff.
Here's
in this movie,
a way to
guys.
ask the counter of this. Did he bang Joan Baez the night of the Cuban Missile Crisis? Is that in Chronicles?
That's
Did he drop a bomb on her? Is that what you're saying? Did he Fidel the button?
Did he throw Khrushchev's boot at her?
Well, I mean that's an interesting device to talk about. Is that I thought that the film shows some restraint in that respect. For example, we don't go to the March on Washington, a place famously
We do
where
see it in TV though.
we see it on TV, but Bob and Joan
Very
performing there,
quickly,
like
yeah.
we don't
Mhm.
go there and try to
Sure.
recreate that
Yep.
sequence or anything.
And then Forrest Gump walks by.
Exactly. But we do have the Cuban Missile Crisis, and someone watches it on TV, and they run downstairs, and they run down to the cafe, and right on time, Bob Dylan singing "Masters of War."
Yeah.
Just so happened to be singing, just as we all lived in fear, and strangers were throwing each other through the streets. It's like it's really ginned up stuff.
sure.
Not that the Cuban Missile Crisis was not an absolutely terrifying moment in American history, but it's when you start bending time around a person's mythos that I get a little bit queasy in these movies.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
that is a rare case where they did something that I was like, this is too much.
There's going to be a lot of like, he actually didn't do that then, and this is why is he playing?
Yeah, I think you kind of need to
bringing
junk
in
a lot
all
of that
back
stuff.
home songs, like he's writing them, but the album's already out. Like, there's definitely moments like that. I did not think of that for 1 second while I was watching the movie. I was never like, well, I was like pretty affected by almost all of it, and like. I gotta say, I mean, I would be the first person to be like, why is this movie about like his two girlfriends? Like he changed the world. Like I think we could make, I found that I found Elle Fanning to be really affecting. I found Monica Barbaro was incredible.
I was shocked.
Shocked. Unbelievable.
And I thought he had like legitimately really electric chemistry with both of them.
With everyone. With Woody, with Pete, with
Yeah.
Jesse.
Yeah.
Like with everyone.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all you want to say about. You have nothing else to say about women. That about does it on that
about
front.
desire.
Yeah, I mean, I
About
think
love, longing. No.
I was.
Do you want to talk about Red Rooms? There's women in that, right?
There certainly is.
Yeah.
Joan is such an interesting figure in their history. They're still friends. They still have this relationship. She's talking in No Direction Home so amusingly about him, where she's just like, God, he was such a bastard, wasn't he? It was so great. I hated him, but I loved it.
There's scenes in Don't Look Back where she's singing a song. Grossman's sitting in the hotel, like reading some papers. Dylan is typing and drinking coffee and smoking. And she's just like, you should finish this song that I'm playing.
Yeah, and he's like, that was a good one. Yeah,
and then
I
like
can
their
finish that.
banter and their interaction, I'm like, to your point, Mal, it's like in a weird way, like I don't think you can actually recapture the crazy intimate moments we have of Bob Dylan's life.
Yeah.
At a time when that was not common.
It doesn't really try to put any of those moments from Don't Look Back. I didn't revisit Don't Look Back after seeing this, but I don't think that they're unlike, say, Haynes.
It's a lot of it. That's London.
Right.
And he doesn't really go to London.
Right, he doesn't go to London.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good choice because some of those moments shouldn't try to replicate them.
Also, every one of those incredible, infamous interviews, you're like, Cate Blanchett really nailed that.
She's phenomenal. But like the Donovan stuff, for example, where he's just so fucking mean to Donovan, just like destroys his soul.
Donovan got one. He caught one stray in this movie.
That a lot of people put that video up of like Donovan. There's a Don't Look Back scene where Donovan plays a song, and then Bob Dylan takes the guitar, and it's like Kobe running through Paul Gasol. Where it's like, we're not fucking homies. Like this is it's all over now, baby blue. Like put yourself in a crypt.
We're not the same. Yeah.
But I've heard also that like they were friends, and then that he did not mean that to. It's like almost like where the myth and the reality leave,
it's
even
like
in the documentary.
Me, I might hit you with one, but it's out of love, man. You hurdy-gurdy,
you tried
man.
to say I didn't care about Joan Baez's interior life.
Well, she's obviously a person who I think could withstand a movie like this too, and we just get really one perspective of her. But obviously, Timothée Chalamet learning to play guitar, I think from scratch, and singing all these songs is an amazing accomplishment. Joan Baez is one of the signature American singers of the 20th century. I mean, her voice reverberates through an entire generation. And Monica Barbaro does a pretty good job.
She's amazing.
And she didn't sing before this. Like, I saw an interview with her after my screening, and she was like, I had to learn to sing during COVID. I was like, what do you mean learn to sing? Learn to sing like Joan Baez?
So this movie is
crazy.
Actually, one of the first films that I can think of that almost benefited from the delay.
I completely agree with that.
Because it was initially called Going Electric. They were going to start it in 2020, I think, or something like that. Plan.
He said in 2019, he showed Ford v Ferrari to the Telluride audience, and either on the way home, he got the Jay Cox script from the president of Searchlight. And he was like, I think you should do this. And he read it on the plane, or maybe read it that night, and emailed him the next day and was like, I need to do this.
Yeah. So this is a situation where I don't know whether or not, like, if they had shot that in June of 2020 or something, would Timothée Chalamet's stuff all be like cutaways and half and half shots or something? But clearly he has spent between playing Paul Atreides and Willy Wonka, like, learned to play guitar.
Yeah, three lords.
Pretty convincingly, to the point where they're actually able to use his guitar playing. There's that one scene. Can we talk about specific scenes and stuff?
Sure. Yeah.
There's that one scene when he's early in his recording career. I think it's his first session, and he's not singing into the microphone, so he has to start the song over. And I'm like, I think he's doing that. That's pretty dope. It's like watching Tom Cruise play pool in Color of Money. You're like, well, if you can do that, then we can do all sorts of other stuff around you being able to convincingly do the thing that this movie is about.
And that has gotten me thinking a lot. I'm very curious what the edit of this movie was like, because you mentioned this earlier, that it feels like 60% performance. It feels like a huge chunk of the film
at least
is just singing.
Yeah.
And maybe when they got on set and they realized these kids can really do this, that maybe we should start cutting away at sequences. Maybe there are things that we don't need to do because the movie is roughly 2 hours, right? It's not some like overstuffed
it's like
3-hour epic.
220 maybe?
Yeah. Okay, 220.
215.
So I'm curious about that. I'm not entirely sure. I will say, I mean, the thing to me that works the best in terms of the framework and device aspect of the movie is Pete and Bob and Seeger and Edward Norton and what he's doing. And there's a part of me that wanted to host this whole pod like
As
Pete Seeger.
with a banjo?
Like, just like, hey, I'm Sean Fennessey, and this is the big picture. I'm here with Chris Ryan.
I'm Sean Fennessey, and I'm real happy about Juan Soto coming over to Queens.
Mallory Rubin just dropped in to play a tune.
Educational
Buster
program.
Olney said that Steve Cohen's going to regret that contract. Well, we'll see about that, Buster. This song is called Wimaway.
If you
No comment.
If you watch,
You just think 15 years, you guys are. It's a marriage.
you were gonna try to troll me on Juan Soto. I don't think so, my friend. I really like what he's doing in this movie. If you watch Pete Seeger interviews, pretty close.
Yeah.
Pretty close. That reedy voice and that aw shucks and that stiff posture and the head held high and that kind of like aw shucks morality that Pete Seeger brings to everything. And that clash, like I think to me, I thought the Alan Lomax aspect of it is way less effective.
I want to get to that.
Okay.
I have to say, one of the really great underlying tensions to the Seeger, Dylan on screen and Chalamet Norton thing on screen is that if you have ever watched any Ed Norton interviews, he really would like to have played Dylan. Like,
oh yeah,
he talks about Bob Dylan so much in interviews. Like, people will be like, Ed Norton, welcome, you're in the Italian job. He's like, Bob Dylan, 63, gets a Telecaster at the West Village Guitar Shop. And that idea that like he kind of missed that window to be able to do that. Although I will make the argument that Mangold could just do the Linklater, like come back to this in 6 years and have another Chalamet.
I was going to raise that.
That's
to you
one
guys.
of the interesting things about like Walk the Line, Dial of Destiny, Logan. Mangold is. This is what I really like about his movies. Actually, obsessed with legacy.
Yeah,
Dial of Destiny worked a lot better for me than I think it did for most people because I was like, it's kind of like brave and cool to be like Indiana Jones got old and washed and the world passed him by. And so it's so interesting to pair him with like the birth of Dylan, the dawn of Dylan. But
just having that other actor be like, God damn it.
But that's
could have been me.
That is funny.
But that meta aspect is perfect.
It plays, yes.
For Seeger because it will not surprise you to hear this at all. You were completely reasonably gently, lovingly mocking the like wide-eyed, doe-eyed, oh my God, Bob Dylan look on everybody's face in the film. I like absolutely loved that part of it because that felt so true to me. That is what would happen when people heard him sing for the first time. Like, who wrote that?
I just think cinematically it's boring. Yeah. It's just not good movie making to make you look at someone looking at something.
It's like Spielberg eyes, but it, I don't know. It's like not a dinosaur. It's a guy in a West Village bar. So like,
yes, I would say like with like Albert or even Joan. For those reasons, it's like you're like, yeah, wow, I would probably look that way too, but less effective. But with Pete and Woody, it felt really like keen and like it tapped into what that would actually have meant in that moment.
So to me, that you just put your finger on something that I wanted to point out. It works so well in the opening scene when he sings the song to Woody.
Is like
when he sings "Song to Woody" to Woody when he's in the hospital bed in Jersey.
Yes,
and Pete is looking at him, and it's the thing that Pete literally says, where he's just like, "I'm watching the future unfold before me in the form of this Minnesotan kid." They nailed it. Like they got the thing that I needed, which was like, you look at this person, you hear their voice, you see the conviction and the creativity, and you're like, he has arrived.
He is him.
But then he is mother. But like they do it like 13 times in the movie. At a certain point, I just thought it was a little bit overstated because we're already in our seats for the Bob Dylan movie. We're already here. I am seated to genuflect.
I kind of also wondered whether or not just in the practicalities of filmmaking, I'd be very interested to hear Mangold talk about this. I don't know if he's going to come on the show, but like the it feels like they shot the Newport stuff like in a block, probably, right? Like over the years, they have like that. They have that crowd, and they can do that, a certain amount of those. Same thing probably for the cafe and the smaller venue shoots. And it did get me wondering, like, I guess what else would you shoot? It's either the band or it's people watching the band. People watching the band, you have to convincingly be like, these people are having their fucking grape squeezed right now. Like Bob Dylan is playing Masters of War. Like they're losing their minds. So there's not that much, like, I wonder, would you have been like into like if they had cut away from the reality of the moment to show like news footage of like the things happening in the streets? Like I kind of like keeping it audience and Dylan, you know, even if it is repetitive and a bit.
I'm not a filmmaker and I don't have like a here's what would have been better take
Sure.
on that. I think it's just that there was like an over reliance on a tactic that you see in all of these movies, which is that they shove this concept down your throat because they don't know what else to do, because he is inherently a musician and not an actor. And so there's nowhere else to go in the movie, which just kind of limits it to me as a movie experience. But you know, when you're playing Hard Rain's Gonna Fall or whatever, like that's the song, you know, that's a song that can change lives.
So let me ask you, did you find yourself coming, aside from obviously like there's half a dozen to a dozen musical performances in this where everybody just is like, I'm fucking taking my shirt off. But
they're not though. That's the thing too. Until we get to the final sequence, I'm sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
But it's only at the final sequence where there's any meaningful action happening. I guess Sylvie kind of storms off, but like aside from that.
Oh, well, so this is like I'm storming out just because I'm like, he's singing Girl of North Country. This is good.
Yeah.
Did you like or even prefer Bob Dylan goes into a party? Bob Dylan wanders into an Irish bar. Bob Dylan does like everyday shit.
Yeah, I did.
You know? Yeah.
I did like
Bob Dylan quickly cleans up an apartment before his girlfriend gets home.
That was quite amusing.
Mal pointed out one of the more interesting sequences, which is sort of like the early stages of his meeting with Sylvie and them going and catching a movie and then talking in a diner. That was like a legitimately dramatized period of his life that I haven't seen in that way before. And so that is an exploration of like who this kid was and whatever it was, 62, 61. And I guess I could have used a little bit more of that, a little bit more of like a deepening of the relationships between those characters. I think I would have liked to have seen a couple of more quiet moments between Bob and Pete. Like, what did they actually talk about?
Or how did that relationship decay, you know?
Yeah, and they make it seem like it's just because of the creative decision-making that Bob had. But, you know, Pete's got a lot of, like, unexplored jealousy there, too. And that's not really interrogated at all. Like, Edward Norton's face is doing a lot of work there. And he gives a very good performance. But nothing is really, like, unpacked.
I wanted to ask you guys about that, actually, on the tracking the Seeger part of the shared arc, but also just the Seeger arc then. There's the scene where they're all sitting around the table prepping for the festival and, you know, quite concerned, right, about what will happen and what will Bob do.
He plays these new songs.
Yeah, and Pete is the Dylan defender in that scene, right? And then, of course, we have a couple moments between them at the shirt shop, and it's, you know, wonderful stuff.
I like that scene. Yeah,
genuinely wonderful stuff. But there's not too much time with Pete between him saying like, "Well, would it really be so bad?" in the room full of like the Sentinels defending the folk revival, and him, you know, in one of the great like mythical moments in music history, like considering grabbing the axe, right? Did you feel like we needed a couple more beats of connective tissue, or is there enough to understand about what Dylan represented for achieving Seeger's dream, for realizing Seeger's dream of the folk revival reaching the masses, to just like inherently get that being jeopardized would be like his life's work and ambition crumbling in real time?
This is a very interesting conversation. I'm not sure if it's a good conversation for a movie podcast about the Bob Dylan movie, but the ultimate philosophical friction between Pete Seeger and Bob Dylan is that Pete Seeger is like, I am a product of and a vessel for a civic cause, that I want to help change the world by speaking and singing honestly about the struggles of those who have less than. which is the most noble thing in the world. And Bob Dylan does do that for a period of time.
Mhm.
He does it from his perspective out of empathy for the human condition, not because he wants to be a part of a movement, but he does it all the same. And so Pete adopts him and uses him in a way with nobility, I think, but uses him to further his own philosophy.
He's the megaphone.
Yes.
He brought the shovel. Everyone else had
shovel.
teaspoons. Yeah.
So we get to the end of that time, and Bob Dylan is like, I am a flame that can't be held.
Mhm.
I have to go explore other sides of my creativity. And it's okay to turn into the self and to explore what I want and what I think will make the most for me. And hopefully will give people something that they want. And Pete is left to feel like, really, he basically gets left behind in 1965.
Yeah, he's on public access television.
And is a tragic figure in many ways. This is both true in real life and in the movie, even though Pete Seeger is fondly remembered as an American hero by some. But like, what is right? What is actually like, what is the right path? Like, Bob is confronted by this conversation by Pete at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
But there's no discussion
So I
because
think-
Bob will not have the discussion.
Yeah, I think that
Yeah.
you're touching on something that I was trying to get at, which is not the counterfactual of what James Mangold could have done.
Mm-hmm.
It's more that in 2024, what matters is these songs. And what people will care about in 50 years are these songs. And so this movie is a platform for these songs in all their different stages, live in an apartment, in a
Totally.
bathtub, in the studio, whatever. In 2060, if we're all still here, we will not be talking about how Pete Seeger felt about being slightly used in the, not on a mass level, right? And I think that this movie is leaning into the idea that, yes, the drama probably comes from should he or should he not go electric at Newport? Who should he spend his romantic time with? Did he live up to Woody's dream of an American song? But what we really want to spend our time on is showcasing this music in the best possible circumstances. And that is like the movie you get versus the movie you want, basically. The movie we might want is one that maybe digs in a little bit more to
Maybe
the
I'm just
details and stuff like that, and like the kind of like the trends and the currents of the West Village at that time. And
Yeah.
I wanted more Bobby Newworth. I wanted more Mike
Dude,
Bloomfield. I
same.
wanted more Al Cooper. I wanted more
Yeah.
Same.
sessions. And what records was he listening to? What
my
bands?
understanding is that the original script is more that because it's more attuned to the Elijah Wald book,
Right.
which is much more of a music book
Yes.
and not a biographical movie or a biographical story. It's about the creation of sound and the decision making
Yeah.
around plugging in, which I think for nerds
Yeah.
and historical fans would have been exciting, but it's obviously not like a movie that Searchlight wants to make either. You know,
Right.
there needs to be some star aspect to it. I don't know. What do you think?
So, one of my favorite moments in the movie, I just was like, this is incredible, is the hard cut from the raucous, I've discovered like my siren whistle. We're making Highway 61 Revisited studio session into sad, lonely Pete and his banjo saying, I can't see you through that little magic box. And we are just in two completely different moment in times. And so that conversation in between the two of them in Newport at the end, when Pete goes to tell the story, the fable of the teaspoons, and Albert's like, we get it. Great story.
7 in the morning.
It's 7 in the morning. I'd like to sleep. Very funny. Very amusing.
I think Norton is fantastic in that scene.
Oh my God. I mean, Norton is tremendous throughout the entire movie. Like, I thought he was sensational. Again, the whole cast was great. I think what you said a few minutes ago is inarguably right. Like, there's nothing, even though we get a couple moments of like, which guitar do you want? And this like illusion almost that there's a potentially different outcome than the one that we know not only happened because it happened, but is inevitable because of who this figure is. There was still the tension in that conversation when Bob puts on the shirt and sits down, is like, can someone just bring me a cigarette? And actually does, despite having rolled his eyes at Pete when he saw him in the street previously, want to hear him out. Like, want to give him like the grace of having that conversation. And I loved the way that scene was structured, because the thing, even if this is not really what happened, and no, the conversation could never have it led to a different outcome. The thing in the movie's dramatization of that moment that swings it the thing that leads Bob Dylan to get up and put his boots on and his tight pants on and walk out is like, I sent you my record. Did you even listen to the songs you're telling me not to sing? And so it's like, how could you possibly, no matter what that person had done for you? Like, I think the movie, I'm really interested in what the movie says, not only about adoration and adulation, but like contempt. Because I think it does this deftly, actually. I don't think that the movie wants to tell us or believes that Bob Dylan had contempt for folk music or Pete Seeger or the people in the room at the banquet who were like, why didn't you bring your guitar? It's like contempt for the idea of standing still.
Yeah.
Right?
And I almost feel like in the reality of the film, maybe not in historical reality, that Dylan was rejecting the fact that Pete was trying to compromise. You know what I mean? Like there's some line in there where he's basically like, if you just do it one more time, if you just play acoustic one more time for us. And it's almost like, if it's just one, then it actually doesn't matter. If it was like, no, folk music is this, you are a folk singer, we built you, you can't go anywhere, that would be one thing. But instead you're like, I know that I can't stop what's about to happen, but if I could just get like 5 more songs from you that make it so that this can then live into next summer and we can sustain this movement. And it was almost like the middle ground is what he rejected. That's how I read that scene, was like him trying to like, he just didn't want to compromise at all. But you're right. Like, that's a great moment in the film. I wish it had more moments of tension like that.
Yeah.
More moments of like, there's like this kind of artistic conversation and this idea about like artistic purity happening. But I think it's like, we got to get to the next song, you know, like that's sort of where the movie's engine takes it.
So I started reading the book. I had never read this book. I'm about 25% in, so I haven't finished it yet, but I mean, it is fantastic.
It's really good.
Holy shit, the writing is like unbelievable. And it's just so interesting.
It's not Wall's first Bob Dylan book. He's a true scholar.
You can tell. But I loved this. This is from the intro, actually, but I loved this paragraph that kind of sums up their relationship and what it represented. Seeger is a central figure in this narrative because the story of Dylan at Newport is also the story of what Seeger built, what Newport meant to him, and the lights that dimmed when the amplifier sucked up the power. It is about what was lost as well as what was gained. This is what made me think about what you just said here. About intertwining ideals and dreams that never quite fit together, and about people who tried to make them fit and kept believing they might. Like, that idea that this was always sort of an illusion, that this could be lasting.
Yeah.
And so if you're holding on to something that you knew was always going to be a moment instead of forever, like, how could you invent? How could you explore? How could you grow? How could you try? How could you do all the things that are elemental to who Bob Dylan is as a figure?
Yeah,
I think the creator.
I think one of the things that he is rejecting too is just the idea of expectation from any direction. And so religiosity of Lomax and folkways and those institutions, I think he just found
useful for a time.
Yeah, but ultimately as suffocating as anything coming in the opposite direction that would seem he would be opposed to politically, because they both represent a kind of conservatism that he's not interested in.
Well, to your Chalamet, we could talk about Chalamet, but to your point about the portrayal of Dylan as a little bit of a prick, it's like one of my favorite little moments is when he's flirting with Elle Fanning at the hootenanny in the Harlem church. Yeah. And the woman's like, shh. And he's just like, nah. So, you know, like, I'm trying to get laid. Like, it's not about like this sort of like piety to, you know, oh, these guys are they playing traditional like folk? No, I don't care. Like, I'm trying to pick up this girl.
One of the only people that he bends the knee for is Johnny Cash, which is a very interesting thing that is very accurate. Like, if you read Dylan's writing in chronicles, if you listen to him in interviews, to this day, he has this abiding respect and he's almost like intimidated by Cash in a way. And so Cash is portrayed by Boyd Holbrook in this movie, who has been Chris's number one boy for going on 10 years. What did you think of Cash?
How'd it compare specifically to his musical renderings in Justified?
I've been a long time fan of this guy, as is James Mangold. So he's been used multiple times by Mangold. I think I put in their document a picture of Warren Buffett. Because Berkshire Hathaway has been seeding, we've been spreading the investment across many years since Narcos. I think look, that's a really hard part to play, and Joaquin Phoenix did a pretty damn good job of it. But what he does is he's the only person in this movie who's cooler than Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
and Bob Dylan and Timothée Chalamet know it. And I think their correspondence is perhaps a little bit more intimate than their in-person meetings. Like that in-person meeting outside of the motel where Boyd's got a box of bugles and is crashing his car back and forth.
That's what it's like with me and you off mic.
But that is the best scene in the movie. Like,
it's very sad.
You want a bugle?
Yeah.
Dropping the coke. Tough.
Yeah, the cast does a great job. I mean, do you feel like we've done Chalamet here? Like,
I at this moment in time think he's going to win Best Actor. I think he is now just fully confirmed as the movie star of his generation. I really don't think there's, Amanda and I think had Margot Robbie at number 1 when we did the list last year because of the incredible success of Barbie. Margot Robbie, I think, is like getting close to 35. He's
28.
28, doing all the right things. I hated Wonka and I hated that he did that, but for his movie stardom, it was the right move.
Yeah.
The Dune thing has just paid off magnificently.
Tremendous.
And now he's making a period piece with the Safdies. So he has 4 quadranted movies in such a phenomenal way. And now in the event that he does win Best Actor, he's the youngest Best Actor winner ever, supplanting Adrian Brody when he won for The Pianist. And
what will be Timothée Chalamet's Brutalist? That's the question.
I don't know. God willing, Brady Corbet is still making movies at that point. But like, it's very rare in this century for someone to be able to pull this off, to be able to play all these different kinds of parts and to maintain this kind of allure. But he's also doing things that Leonardo DiCaprio did not do. Like going on College Game Day.
I don't want to be too like overzealous about this, but I have to say like the logical way to have done this is like he did an interview with Zane Lowe on Apple's YouTube, and he was very, very like pious about Dylan and is like
he has been throughout this whole tour.
And so I was kind of like, this is going to be one of those things where it's like, did he accidentally like forget to drop the Dylan voice when he's doing interviews, and is this going to be like a little bit too
the Austin Butler
too safe?
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah.
And then when he did Game Day, I was like,
Lisan Al Gaib.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like,
totally. Marty.
This is basically a musical about a guy from the 60s. How are we going to get the fucking homies to come out? And it's going on Game Day and being a true ball knower. And now, and since then, I was just telling Mal, like, he did this clip with Entertainment Tonight. And he's like, this woman's like, hi, we're from Entertainment Tonight. He's like, I know. And they're like, what? And he's just like, I'm responsible for a lot of your engagement. I'm always smashing the heart button. And they're like, okay. And he just plays along with everything they're asking him. They're like, we saw you on Game Day. He's like, yeah, I don't really want to be an actor. I want to be a sportscaster. Acting is like an on-ramp to sportscasting. And I'm just like, you got it, man. You got it. The whole world's in your hands. Like,
what do we think the actual current power ranking is for his heroes between Bob Dylan and Bill Simmons?
Bill, yeah.
Who's 1 and who's 2 currently?
I mean,
has Bill reckoned with this at all?
I don't think so.
That's what makes him him. Yeah.
Because Bill won't acknowledge. He doesn't read the comments. Doesn't look at his mentions. Has Timmy been in his mentions? Do we know?
Think if Bill had a choice,
He like went on Kimmel, right? It was
sincerely,
like Bill Simmons.
if Timothée Chalamet was like, I want to do a 2-hour sit down with Bill Simmons, and instead Drake May was like, I will do 15 minutes on Zoom brought to you by Right Guard, who would Bill pick?
Oh my God.
I think we all know the answer to that question. Is there anything else you want to say about Chalamet beyond just this is a incredibly difficult to achieve performance that he achieved?
I mean, I don't know that I have anything to add. I just thought it was like mesmerizing, honestly. I don't have anything close to the level of familiarity with the other contenders for Best Actor this year that you guys do, obviously, but I certainly believe that he should win.
Yeah, it's Coleman Domingo, right?
Coleman Domingo and Sing Sing, Ray Fiennes and Conclave.
Ray Fiennes is the great love of my life.
Adrian Brody and The Brutalist, and probably Daniel Craig and Queer would be my guess for the lineup.
Strong field.
Lots of well-known people. Brody, of course, has won before. The Craig movie is not beloved.
Right.
Sing Sing is still a smaller film. And then you've got Ray Fiennes, who
the best.
We all three of us greatly admire, and who has a its time narrative.
Yeah.
this is related to the film. Like, will this movie be commercially successful? Because if it is, then the chances of Best Actor really increase, in my opinion.
No idea.
I don't either. I have no feel.
Have you seen any tracking on it?
I have no feel for it whatsoever.
My guess is that this is going to do very well. My guess is that this is a movie that people who are not like, I'm plugged into movie media and like thinking about discourse about movies are like, that's earmarked. That's Christmas Day or day after. My mother, who cannot really leave the house, is like, I would really like to see A Complete Unknown in a theater.
There you go.
I mean, like, that is the kind of thing that was like, I think Kamala is going to win because my mom's voting for her. But like, I think that like, that's not like accurate.
Oh,
but you know what I mean? Where it's just like people who don't fuck with movies a lot are like, the 4 I'm seeing this year, this is one of them.
There is something in that, like, again, kind of like meta sense about going to the theater to see this that obviously it's not the same as seeing Bob Dylan in concert, but it's approximating that thing of sharing the music with the crowd. So I do think that there will be a lot of people who feel that urge to go say, like, I want to. And it was fun in the screenings. Like, there was a lot of laughter, you know, at the acid wit. Like, everybody was very respectful. There was no loud singing, but there was, like, you know, some swaying in the seats. You could tell that people were moved. So yeah, I do think people will, and I think the thing about it just feels like there's going to be so much out in the world, out in the ether about the Chalamet performance that will then drive even more people who are maybe on the fence to try to see it sooner. I think the thing that was so great about the performance, in addition to just like the awe that you felt watching him play guitar and play the harmonica, and the posture, the way he carried himself, with the actual singing, it was, I thought, in a way that is like not always the case in a biopic, the just right calibration of, obviously you are trying to imitate
in his own voice.
This iconic thing, but it definitely sounded like Timothée Chalamet. It was unmistakably Timothée Chalamet
It's
singing.
a good choice to try to get close to the register, but not mimicry.
Yeah.
Which, when I watched the trailer, I was like, oh, he's not even trying to do mimicry. Like, this is not close. But then when you feel it cumulatively, when you hear all the songs, you see that it's like he's doing the best he can. He can't get to the raspy, reedy place that Bob had that was like, no one really ever sang like that before.
Yeah, and he also just doesn't smoke 42 Marlboros a day.
I believe it was north of 80.
Yeah.
He sounds like him also, though, when he's in that right, like, sweet spot way when he's speaking, just the way that he says, like, you know, your songs are like oil paintings in a dentist's office.
That's in the trailer, and I think that's when people were like, we have Houston, we have a problem. Yeah. It's because, like, if the whole movie is this guy talking like this, and that is actually
but then in the flow
really
of that
offset
scene,
by
it's
Joe
like,
Baez being like, what are you talking about?
Shut the fuck up.
I'm trying to make you coffee. Yeah.
Great stuff.
What was your favorite song performance? Do you have one, Chris?
My favorite is the moment where they're doing Highway 61 Revisited, and he's experimenting with the kazoo kind of thing.
Yeah.
Mostly because it is the, like, most naked Chalamet is as Dylan is kind of becoming who he is, but he's like laughing at a guy making a face whose face we never see, and he's like, "You're killing me! Like, I'm gonna lose it!" Like. Yeah. And it's all the banter that if you listen to the bootleg series, you get a lot of these alternate takes where, like, Hammond or Wilson are like, "Hey man, keep trying that," or somebody's like, "I can't remember how this ends," or "That's all I got." And just to get a little bit of that chasing Mercury on screen was great. So that's probably my favorite.
I like that one. What about for you?
Can I do like 5 or 6?
How about
Wouldn't
2 or
it be
3?
A Malpod.
Yeah.
You didn't
2
break
or
the
3?
wheel. Yeah.
I mean, there were like 3 dozen songs in the movie.
There were a lot. I asked you when you went a second time to make a list of every performance. Yeah. And
she did.
You got fucking close, man. You got almost every song.
I got a lot. Yeah.
How did you do that? Were you writing throughout the movie, or did you watch the credits and write them down?
You just remembered?
When I left the first time, I was like panicked that I wasn't going to be able to remember all of them. So the second time, I was really like trying to, while still, you know, allowing myself to be swept up in the movie, pair moments in the chronology of the film with when we heard the music. But also just, again, because the musical moments were so good, it was pretty like easy to remember them. We already talked about Song to Woody. I think that and I Was Young When I Left Home, I'll kind of pair as just these like early moments where really quickly I realized I was going to have a great time watching the movie. And like, you just sort of do, it's like, oh, right, the prophet has arrived. I thought that Blowing in the Wind.
Where are we? What number are we at? Just out of curiosity.
This is, I'm going to say, technically number 1 because that dual smuggle was something that we had already talked about Song to Woody, and so I smuggled. I was young.
The Rubin smuggle.
Blowing in the Wind when. This is like the morning after.
It's after he smashes.
Bob and Joan.
Can you imagine smashing Joan Baez and then being like, here's my song?
Shades
Blowing in the wind.
Shades of you on the Skyfall pod making a turkey sandwich. Yeah.
Like, unbelievable. I mean, that was great. And I think it actually particularly memorable because Blowing in the Wind, both inside of his relationship with Joan, where she wants to play it at the concert and he's like, fuck this. But also he just says later, like, they just want me to play Blowing in the Wind for the fucking rest of my life, right? To have seen as he was creating it, how just astonishing it was in real time, and the way Joan kind of like sits behind him on the bed. That was great. You know, I really loved Don't Think Twice, It's All Right, not only because it's one of my favorite songs ever, but the way that it stitched together with where we were in the story in the film, because you're initially hearing Dylan sing it in the studio and you get that who wrote this, he did moment, right? And then it pairs with the iconic photo shoot for the Freewheelin' album cover. And then we go right from Bob singing it into Joan singing it at the concert, and then into hearing Joan on the radio and that argument with Sylvie and Bob. That I just thought that was like really, really good.
She knew Robbie. You don't sing like that unless
she sure did. She sure did. But I think my favorite was the Times They Are Changing. Like, I thought that was just
that's everyone realizing all at the same time. Yeah,
and like he didn't do that at Newport, right? Like he didn't debut that at Newport.
I actually don't know.
That was in the film Newport 64, and so it's like this pivot point, right?
Yeah, and that song is out before then.
Yeah, well, that album is 64, yeah. But the thing I loved most about that was his response. Like, we get a lot of Sylvie in that sequence, but Dylan's face as the crowd in real time is singing this back to him. And he's like, kind of like maybe not feeling it, actually, right? He's like, what have I wrought here? Happening?
Yeah.
I thought that was really exquisite. And the Amy Babe duet was great.
Did you have any
like 5 or 10 more
remaining songs?
I mean, there were tons. The music was great. They did a great job.
I've always really loved All I Really Want to Do, and so him and Joan in Pittsburgh,
that was great.
Doing that together, I really liked. I mean, I think the one that when he's doing a song to Woody, I was like, oh, good, this isn't going to be a fucking disaster. This movie, you know, like I really was just. It hit me. When the Ship Comes In is like an amazing song.
Great. That scene was great.
That's a very special song in that era for him too, as a writer.
I love that.
I really liked when I misremembered this. I think he does I'll Keep It With Mine he's like singing it in the bathtub. I thought he was like messing around with it in the studio, but I may be misremembering
which one?
I'll Keep It With Mine, the one that
Nico. Is he like on the piano?
That's what I thought. Yeah, I thought he was like, because that's also in the bootleg series. It's like him kind of
never
like
released on an album,
writing that, and then Nico does it later in the 60s.
The one thing that is interesting is, you mentioned the bootleg recordings. I think the Royal Albert Hall performance is like my favorite of those. It was kind of monumental when it was released. I guess was it late 90s, early 2000s, and that is the same era that the movie ends with, where he starts touring the Bring It All Back Home stuff and Blonde on Blonde and all that starts coming, and those recordings are so rip roaring and raw and exciting, and this band can't replicate that. And so part of the reason when you get to the end of the movie, one, I'm just like, the Alan Lomax stuff is so cartoonish with like turn it off and just like
getting in fist
fighting
fights.
The man. Like I just that stuff kind of like bummed me out when I was watching it, because I was like, this is such like fake movie
I
bullshit.
think that's
my least
like,
favorite part by far.
That's like the cavern run in Top Gun Maverick. Like they have to have something like a dogfight.
Yeah, but like that you just described something that's awesome, and this part isn't awesome. So I really didn't like that stuff, but also I don't think the band sounds that good. I don't think those performances of those electric songs sound that great.
You don't think they sound that good when you listen to the Newport recordings, or you don't think they sound that good in the movie?
They sound okay in the movie, but they don't sound as good as the acoustic performances in the movie to me. And I have such fond appreciation for those electric recordings that like that was a rare case where I was like, this isn't as good as
Royal Albert
the stuff
Hall
I
and
like.
Manchester are like
Oh
as
my
good
God.
as
Sick.
rock bands have ever
Yeah.
sounded.
Absolutely.
Manchester is fucking insane.
Yeah. But there's a
And
lot
that's
to choose
Play
from.
Fucking Loud, right? Like that's when he's like, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, most of it is good. Like most of the musical performances are good.
Well, just for context, like, what are your favorite Dylan albums actually? Like, do you have a favorite period of his music, or kind of dotted throughout his discography?
Since college, I've felt like the 72 through 78 is like his masterpiece era. Like I think his writing is at its best in that period of time.
Same.
That tracks.
Blood on the Tracks,
Blood on the
75.
Tracks, and
Best album ever made.
like the Desire also, I just think
Love
is like
Desire.
nonstop
Yeah.
perfection. But you get older and you like get into Saved and you get into all the Christian stuff and start finding ways to appreciate Empire Burlesque and albums that I tried to hear when I was 25 and I couldn't hear at all, and now it's on a continuum of interest to me. But I think the 70s stuff is still probably what I like the most. I did in 17 I wrote a piece for the site about the 10-year anniversary of I'm Not There and John Wesley Harding, which is 67, and how that's like this odd little I don't know, it's like it stands alone. It's like it's not connected to anything, and it's not connected really to the Basement Tapes, which were kind of being made at that time. It's not really connected to the direction that he goes in the late 60s. It's not really connected to Blonde on Blonde.
Yeah.
It's like kind of a folk record, but not really. So when I was writing that piece, I listened to the album like roughly 300 times. So I have all those songs committed to memory. So I guess that's on my mind too. Anna, what about you? What is your favorite period?
Same. Yeah. Blood on the Tracks is my absolute favorite. But I mean, because of this movie, I have always loved Free Will and Bob Dylan, but because of this movie, I've been listening to it
just nonstop.
Yeah. Really, all of them from that that stretch. But I mean, that's just an incredible fucking album. It's unbelievable.
The first 14 albums.
Yeah. Bringing It All Back Home is
all good.
amazing.
Yeah.
Like
What about you?
amazing.
His first Going Electric years are to me like kind of like my platonic ideal of what rock and roll sounds like in a lot of ways. So like when you even go back on bootleg and listen to like She's Her Lover Now and it takes a lot to laugh and a train to cry. It takes a train to cry. Like I'm like, that still sounds like the Oblivions now to me or whatever. So that Blonde on Blonde's my favorite album, and Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid is my underdog
Fun one.
like
It's a
one
great
I
one.
go back to a lot.
Number 4. That's the one.
Oh,
Blonde
God,
on Blonde
dude.
is so good.
Billy number 4.
Yeah.
Oscars?
Yeah, I mean, it was nominated for Best Drama at the Golden Globes, and now I think it has found its way meaningfully into Best Picture. I guess that's cool. It's not in my top 10 movies of the year. I like it. You adore. Is this like a 5-star movie for you?
No.
Okay.
No, again, I don't really think it's a movie.
Yeah. Okay. It's just like
necessarily.
a sentimental object that you enjoy.
I just found it like so engrossing.
Okay.
Really like hypnotic.
Yeah.
And so I loved the experience of watching it, and then I loved like the very familiar, well-trod rabbit hole it sent me back into. Like that's just a
Exactly
fun,
right.
fun experience.
It's a gateway drug. We probably have overused the phrase "a great time at the movies" to describe things that aren't that good, but for a great time at the movies.
Red Rooms, a great time at the movies.
I believe we said that
I'll
about
see you
Venom.
in the Red Rooms.
A complete unknown pervert in the Red Rooms.
Red Rooms. I don't know. My bad. This literally was that. Where it's like you go see Twisters and you're like, that was a great time at the movies. It's like, this is like, yo, dude, this is a really, really good time at the movies. If you like Bob Dylan's music, you will love it. Is that a Best Picture winner?
No, I don't.
I often wonder for
I don't
you,
think so.
because you have this relationship with the Oscars specifically, where it's like, what's good for movies and the Oscars versus what I want.
Ooh.
And
That's why I've been banging the Brutalist drum, because
Yeah.
I'm like, it's both. I'm like, this is something that's looking back and forward, something that is incredibly resonant right now, but is an ode to something from the past. that I hope more people are interested in terms of the art of movie making and movie going.
Mhm.
And also will probably be nominated for a fuck ton of Oscars. Like that's ultimately my thing.
Yeah.
I often advocate for mainstream movies like this
Yeah.
to get recognized because I think it's good for the health.
Do you think it's
the
bad
industry.
that this is like boomer masturbation?
Well, I think I'm just like you guys. I'm willing to make an exception because Bob Dylan's the fucking man. So,
Yeah. How many cranks? How many cranks are you giving this one?
Oh man, 4.5, 4.
wow.
Yeah.
Well, does that mean it would take 4.5 pumps to achieve?
Oh right. So like,
what's the scale here?
Yeah.
Great,
What's the
boy.
red rooms?
Is like
Great.
one
Yeah.
actually better than 5?
How many red rooms do I want to go into?
I give this film 7 red rooms.
You guys have mentioned red rooms a lot.
Chris
Don't
just
watch
saw
it.
it. It's a
Yeah.
complicated film
Yeah.
with a
Oh,
lot of
man.
strong ideas.
Is it possible that the 3 most meaningful things we watched this year were Dune Part 2,
Mm-hmm.
A Complete Unknown, and Timmy on Game Day? Just the Timmy trifecta.
One of the great runs.
I have no notes.
What else is he doing? He's doing the
Safdie
Safdie
movie.
movie.
He's got to make Dune 3.
Yeah.
That might be a minute though, right?
Yeah. I hope he doesn't do Wonka too. Jesus Christ.
I
You seen
probably
Wonka?
will.
I have not seen Wonka.
You saw it?
I will at some
I'm
point.
not going to see Wonka.
You won't watch it.
I will not.
Why not?
I
Watch
just
it.
have no interest in it. I don't even know. Is that Roald Dahl? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do know that he got a custom pair of Wonka dunks because I saw that on Sneaker News on Instagram.
Okay. Great story. um,
Thank you.
any closing thoughts?
I want to keep talking about Bob Dylan.
Oh my god, I know.
We
This
don't have to
was
stop.
Fun.
I mean, I made a list of the movies that that are meaningful to him, and some of them are widely available, and others are not. We've mentioned "Don't Look Back" quite a bit. The D.A. Pennebaker documentary. If people are interested
Great
in this
stuff.
period, he
Yeah.
captures him during this period. "Eat the Document" is another Pennebaker documentary that is not widely available. I just bought myself a copy on eBay over the weekend.
Will you be doing an unboxing on film?
Maybe, yeah. Bobby in the Box. That's a good
Get
idea.
Dylan on
I
top that Let's number. You know.
What'd you think of Bob's tweet about the movie?
Oh man,
I thought it was great.
great stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think he wrote that?
I don't know what's up with his Twitter.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's also a strange time to become a prolific X user.
I know. Is he on Blue Sky?
I don't know,
Do
but
we know?
the best thing ever was his Sirius XM show. When it
Oh
would be
my
like
God,
the
I have
sound of wind
So
rustling
many
in the back.
playlists of his
We're
like
back here
Bob
listening
Dylan's.
to Jimmy Jam's Do Dynamo.
Yeah,
This
he's
is
just-
a great tune from 1957 out of Oklahoma. It's really good.
Man.
James Austin Johnson is in this movie very briefly as an MC at Gertie's.
Mhm.
He, of course, is the proprietor of the active best Bob Dylan impression on Saturday Night Live. He busted it out
Yeah.
Great
when
stuff.
Chalamet was hosting.
Great stuff.
I was nice to stumble upon this little Easter egg too, which is that the Jesse character, who's the blues musician
iconic.
who appears
Yeah.
on Seeger's public access show, is portrayed by Big Bill Morganfield,
Mhm.
who is the son of Muddy Waters, who is a hugely influential person on Bob Dylan's musical style. And, Bob could play the blues,
Yeah.
pretty
Oh, yeah.
credibly
Oh, yeah.
play the blues in that time. And so I like that little bit. Were
That
there
was
any-
great. Watching them together was great. Particularly amused by the, offer of the guitar and the refusal. Like it would be like touching your woman. Don't,
Yeah.
don't hold her too tight. Amazing.
I had no idea where that scene was going when it was happening.
Man,
that was
that
one of the
whole
few
thing
times where
where,
I was
like,
like, "Ooh, what's happening
Seeger
here?"
tries to get out of
That's
the
the thing. It just
the
feels
interview with the guy.
With Jesse, yeah,
with
yeah.
Jesse.
like. Oh, Pete.
Couple of other Bob movies. So that we've got the 2 Scorsese docs, right? We've got No Direction Home, required viewing if you liked this movie. Rolling Thunder Review, one of my favorite movies of 2019, I think it was, which is another kind of like assembly documentary that is
But a little
part
bit
real,
more
part fictionalized.
Yeah, it's a little bit more indulgent in the Bob Dylan self-mythologizing.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
It's pulling in part from Ronaldo and Clara, which is a movie that
Right.
Bob made in the 70s that was, I don't know if it was ever formally released, but it's kind of like the ultimate bootleg of Dylanology at this point. Last Waltz, of course, he performs at the final concert for the band, also made
Oof.
by Martin Scorsese. We got Masked and Anonymous, the Larry Charles movie that Bob wrote that is abjectly terrible, but is a nice little time capsule of that era. I think it's early 2000s. And then Haynes' I'm Not There,
Mhm.
which is a great film that I love. And
Yeah.
the difference between that movie and this movie is you've got a lot of people in that movie singing scraps of Dylan songs throughout, but you the movie closes like so mesmerizingly. I don't know if you remember this with just the harmonica performance of Bob.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Like right in 63 or
Mhm.
64. And this movie's like the opposite. Like it's like a deluge of Bob, like over and over again on your head. So they're an interesting contrast of styles. Are there any other Bob Dylan, Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid?
Yeah, I mean,
course, he
I have a
performs in?
couple that aren't movies, but are just like personal experiences. So one thing that if people can find it, I can't remember if it's on PBS's app that they have. The 30th anniversary concert was basically my
Yes.
introduction to him.
Oh, yeah.
And so that features
yeah.
all these artists who at the time were pretty contemporary, like John Mellencamp and Tom Petty, doing covers. And then Dylan comes out at the end and does a set and then does an all-star jam.
So awesome.
So that
Yeah.
features
Incredible.
the OJ's doing Emotionally Yours, which is fucking astonishing, and Neil Young doing Just Like Tom Thumb's Blues,
Mhm.
Oh my
which is
God.
incredible. So check that out if you can find it. And what was the other one that I was going to recommend people look for? Oh, G.E. Smith from Saturday Night Live,
Mhm.
one of the Saturday Night Live band leaders, did a series of interviews, I think with the Television Academy, but I can't remember. But it's like him sitting in his apartment, sitting for like an hour-long interview. Half of it is about touring with Dylan.
Mhm.
And it is the most insightful, wonderful conversation
Huh.
where he talks about getting hired basically off of SNL and going to meet Dylan at Montana's at like 1 a.m. to rehearse all night.
Huh.
And Dylan just being like, you got the gig. And then doing the
Wow.
never ending tour with Dylan for a while. And it is just an incredible piece of ephemera on YouTube. If you just type in G.E.
Oh,
Smith
man.
Dylan interview, it'll come up.
Have you guys ever seen Hearts of Fire? This is a rare film in which Bob
No.
Dylan stars, a Richard Marquand movie. You may recall him from the Star Wars trilogy.
Sure.
He's the lead of this movie, made in 1987. He plays a reclusive musician, once a huge rock star, takes a younger female protege, played by Fiona. While on a tour, she meets a younger, more popular rocker and switches her loyalties. The younger and more popular rocker is played by Rupert Everett.
Hmm.
I haven't seen this movie.
Did we mention
Nor
Llewyn
have I.
Davis?
We didn't. So,
Great fucking movie.
like, Llewyn Davis is a 5-star movie.
Yep.
That's an incredible movie.
And
Yeah.
that's obviously a movie that is the most about Bob
I always
Dylan
get very sad
without
when the
being
cat
about Bob
gets hit
Dylan.
by the car, though.
Why?
Because I love animals and I don't want to see harm befall them. That's why.
I see.
It's also the inverse of like all the women fawning at Bob Dylan and in Complete Unknown is Carrie Mulligan being like, you should tape your dick. Like,
Tearing out his soul.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what do you want to
Great
say
movie.
about it?
It is the other side of this coin. It's the movie that you kind of were looking for inside of this movie a little bit, where it's like, why is he like the way he is, and what were the moments in between these moments of singing, and what if Bob Dylan had just basically missed by 5 degrees, you know?
mhm.
And it's one of their great late period films. I read with interest that I think it was in Dan Riley's GQ piece, or I can't remember. It's around that time Chalamet met with Joel Cohen to talk about like how to accurately bring justice to Dylan, because he was working with Francis McDormand on French Dispatch. And I would love to have a recording of that conversation.
Oh, man.
You think Joel was nice about it?
I'm sure he was, but he obviously made the movie. He couldn't have made a Dylan movie the way he wanted to make it.
Right. Joel Cohen never would have made a Complete Unknown.
Yeah.
That's not of interest.
He's
to him.
interested
Yeah.
in the guy who fucking missed it, you
Yeah,
know,
right.
like
Yeah.
just by like 10 steps.
And yet, the music in that movie is as close to
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
1962 at Cafe Wa as anything you're going to hear. So it's a great movie if people haven't seen it. This was great,
Had a blast. We gave you our hearts, but you wanted our souls.
as always.
So
I'll come
I
back
gave
for
it-
more later.
7 red rooms.
Mhm.
Mallory gave it 4 out of 5 cranks. Did we get your official? How many years of Soto's contract will you be giving this movie?
Oh, wow.
Well, he can have all 15.
Does
I
he
don't-
make
I'm
it
not
past
care
the
about
5-year
that.
opt out when he takes Steve
We're
Cohen
going
to
to
the
keep that war
cleaners again?
above 2 through our late 30s. That's what we're all trying to do here at The Ringer as we all age
2?
slowly.
Christ.
Um,
we can do better
I-
than that.
I'm Pete Seeger. Steve Cohen bankrupted several industries in order to pay Juan Soto's.
Juan Soto dropped in to the 40-man roster. He'll be hitting
Oh.
third in this lineup.
Heard Juan Soto tore his hamstring in spring training.
Yeah.
Wow.
Do you think that line
Put that
about
devil on me, Ricky Bobby. All right.
the toilet like still smelling is that about the Mets?
It's just completely unnecessary. Just completely. What's up? You guys are big mad about Juan Soto.
Not at all.
I feel
big,
fine.
Big mad.
I
at
feel
all.
fine.
You-
I'm mad
you've
about
lost
the Red
Corbin
Sox trading
Burns.
for Garrett Crochet.
Better
I'm not
you guys
mad
than the
about
fucking
Mets signing
Dodgers.
Soto.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are the Phils gonna do?
The
Jordan
word is
Romano.
there was a tweet. I can't remember the exact wording, so I'm going to paraphrase
There
it.
was a tweet.
And it was that Dave Dombrowski brought his trunks. No, Dave Dombrowski wants to go swimming, but he brought his swim trunks or something
It
like
was
that. I
Scott
don't-
Boras, and it was an iconic Scott Boras quote. The quote was, "The Phillies are not yet in the swimming pool, but they're wearing their swimming trunks."
Uh-huh.
Which really, Boris the GOAT, he is like the heir apparent to Bob Dylan in terms of poetry of the mind.
Every time you try to put your hands around Scott Boras, it's like
It's a flame.
He burns you, yeah.
He's
by
like,
not-
the AAV is going up.
I don't know how to rate this movie. I mean, I feel similarly to you. It doesn't really feel like a movie to me. I will watch it again.
You think your dad's going to go see it?
My dad doesn't care about Bob Dylan. I didn't get him from my dad, really. My dad is not a meaningfully progressive person.
If
so-
it was a complete unknown, but it was about Dwayne Allman, would your dad go see it?
Fuck yeah. He would be first in line. He would love that. I liked my experience with it. I really thought it was going to be the worst movie of the year for me, and it is not that at all.
Okay.
It didn't betray my interest in Bob at all.
Yeah.
So thanks so much, guys. You're the best. But this
Thank
is
you.
nice. Twice in 1 month on
Oh
this
my
show.
God, I know I'm
Incredible.
getting spoiled.
I know.
Yeah. You'll definitely be back at some point in the next 5 years, Mel. You can count on that. Thank you to Chris Ryan. Thank you to Mallory Rubin for her work here. And thank you to Jack Sanders, who's our video producer here.
He's a filmmaker.
One of the good men here at The Ringer. Thanks, of course, to our producer, Bobby Wagner. Who, boy, he is the light of my life. Thank you for listening to the show. We'll see you next time when we talk about the little film called Nosferatu. See you then.